And now I'd like to introduce Cassidy Murphy, who will be introducing our speaker.
Thanks, Sally. And thank you for everyone for being here. Our speaker today is India Woods, and you can see a little bit of her biography on the slide, but I'll tell you that it was fairly easy for me to connect with her as a speaker because she hit all of the right buttons with me. She's an explorer and an adventurer. I'm not going to steal too much from her talk today, but I learned that she uncovered the bone of an Allosaurus when she was 12 years old and went on to dig up the entire skeleton of the fossil, which I think is a really wonderful thing to have done when you're young. She had traveled to Colorado. It sounds like as she was going through her life and loved this area. She's retired in the last few years, it sounds like, and now that her daughters are not with her, she decided to take a hike across Colorado and prepared for it, planned it, and then did it this last summer. So she's going to tell us about that, and I hope that we can all welcome her to Boulder Rotary. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I have a very high regard for Rotary. I was a Rotarian for 10 years with Boulder Valley Rotary Club, was the chair of community service and international service, and believe quite strongly in the four-way test. It actually helped me along my journey with several difficult decisions. So thank you for having me. And I want to acknowledge the community's loss this week. And I hope it feels appropriate to do a bit of a celebration of our wonderful state and our community across this entire state. You know, Boulder is not alone any more than Pueblo or Baca County. We're all here together. I started thinking about this hike several years ago. I have a bunch of maps in my bathroom. I've always loved maps. I'm not retired, actually. I had a business for a number of years and have become a writer now as my career, which is a happy thing. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Colorado Beeline, my 732-mile hike across the state. Now, this is not the Colorado Trail by any stretch. You can see the yellow line is a transect line, often used in biology. And I decided that I would try to hike as close to that line as I could in the summer of 2020 and go all the way across the state. And I was completely unqualified. I had backpacked maybe 5 days in my life, but I had visited much of the state and was somewhat fit. I'm going to give you a little bit more of an introduction to the hike, go through basically a slideshow of what it looks like if you had been on my shoulder for those 3 months. And then, given those observations, and given that most people don't have the time or energy to hike all the way across the state, I'd like to give you my thoughts on the implications for Colorado policy, given what I saw. Total elevation gain across the entire state, it was like a 700-mile mountain. Total elevation gain was the equivalent of Everest and Denali put together. I spent 65 days hiking between May 11th and August 18th. About a third of that time was actually spent scouting my route, caching water, and leaving food drop-offs. This was no easy thing, and a very different adventure than, say, the Colorado Trail, where you can buy a book on where to go, where to get water, where to camp. This was totally unknown. Nobody had ever done this before. I was solo 2/3 of the time, most of the nights in the tent, but other assorted places as well. And I did have a few friends join me along the way, though most people, for some reason, they were not that excited once they found out I was doing 10 or 15 miles a day with a 30-pound pack. They thought, no, why don't you come for tea some other time? So back in January a year ago, I hired an endurance coach and got in shape for this. I took classes with the Colorado Mountain Club. They're a wonderful resource. And I gave a talk to the CMC about how I did the hike. So if you're interested in that, just Google India Wood CMC presentation on YouTube. Wonderful book, 98.6, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive. I memorized that thing and it was very helpful. You know, I'm kind of an odd combination of poet and analytical person. I did get my MBA from MIT, and I love maps, but I also love porcupines and poetry. So there you go. I started this hike with a number of questions, as you can see here, about, you know, is Colorado really overrun with people? Have we changed everything? How's public land doing? Private land? Where do the animals live? Are there any animals left out there? Can I even walk across the state? Is there water? And finally, will ranchers make friends with a boulderite? And that's a good question. Boulder has a complex reputation in the rest of the state. And part of my goal was to be an ambassador for Boulder and really listen to people. We have the reputation of being kind of the know-it-all vegan uncle. And I wanted to get past that and really listen to people and make friends with everybody, no matter their religion or politics or anything. So now comes the photo tour. I've broken it into 5 sections based on geography. So let's get started. So here's my entire hike, and you can see this first of 5 segments is down here, started in the southeast corner and hiked to La Junta. Each segment's about 150 miles. This is mostly across Prairie and the Purgatoire Canyon area. Most people think, oh, that eastern 40% of Colorado, it's just flat and dull, isn't it? It's beautiful. So many birds, thousands of lark buntings, a lot of prairie, these canyons, farming, cattle ranching, but it's pretty sparse. I mean, in 90 miles, there was 2 towns, 1 grocery store, not much surface water. I mostly had to hide water at each place where I planned to camp. This is the Kelly family with myself plus my friend Dennis, who hiked with me the first few days. The Kelly family just got me off on the right start. They were so friendly and supportive and said, India, you can do this. And we hiked across their ranch for the first 15 miles. Starting line, 8 a.m., May 11th, 2020. Looks like a manhole cover, but that's the official memorial for the Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado corner. So we started hiking. Soon came to the Cimarron River. Used to have pockets of water in it. It is now dry. Ranchers told me that that's because of groundwater pumping for irrigation and also the damming of many small tributaries into the Cimarron. Beautiful grasslands out there and big sky. I loved it. Dryland farming. Now this was a drought year, so things were looking pretty brown. This is my hiking trail. It's 60 feet wide and goes dead straight. We did have a turn, got very excited. Many abandoned towns in the southeast corner of Colorado. This was the center of the Dust Bowl. Abandoned houses. And the town of Springfield, where I stayed a couple nights. Then on to Two Buttes Creek. In 90 miles, I only saw water in ponds or a creek, I don't know, maybe in 4 places in 90 miles. But beautiful. This is a bull snake pretending he's a rattler, puffed his cheeks up and scrunched up his body and hissed like, oh my God, it was so creepy. This is on the Wilson Ranch. They let us hike across their ranch for a few days. Very, again, just wonderful people that I never would have met otherwise. My daughter Charlie joined me. going into the Picket Wire Canyon lands, southeast of La Junta. The Cholla Forest. One of our campsites, you can see I had an ultralight Z-Pax tent, expensive but well worth it, weighed under a pound. Crossing the Purgatoire River with a friendly cow.
Beautiful.
Then on to the next segment. So this was wild prairie country and farmland. Next, from La Junta on to Manitou, went through towns along the Arkansas River, past Pueblo Airport and the Pueblo Chemical Weapons Depot. That was interesting. Chico Creek, Fountain Creek, Colorado Springs to Manitou, another 150-mile segment. A lot of irrigation from the Arkansas River. We passed through a couple of ranches, saw incredible wildlife on the original prairie. Not much wildlife, actually almost nothing in the tilled field areas along the Arkansas, very little wildlife. Human population kind of stable along the Arkansas, but growing in the cities. I had to cache water most places. This is my lovely campsite in Manzanola. It's actually worked out fine, but I did have to cache water at most places because of water quality issues along the Arkansas, a lot of it due to agricultural activity. This is a computer tilled field, not what we usually think about historically as a farm. Arkansas River with the snowmelt. And that Arkansas River water in the Arkansas Valley is used extensively for irrigation. Old cottonwood. And then I walked along a lot of irrigation canals on my journey. This one has been stripped of every last cottonwood tree. It's like this death zone. It's kind of weird, but it conserves water because cottonwoods use a lot of them. So real trade-offs. I was told that some of these prosperous looking farms were because the farmers have sold their water rights to Front Range cities. They get good money for that, and then they lease back the water for the current time. Town of Fowler. A couple generations of farmers. And this is the ranch of Doug Wiley. And he practices sustainable agriculture, biodynamic. Unusually for a dairy farmer, he lets the calves stay with the cows. And he's just been a huge advocate in that region for biodynamic farming. There's some tough times there east of Pueblo. So this is looking back at Pueblo, heading up the hill toward the Pueblo Chemical Weapons Depot. I did call ahead, let them know I was coming. I was afraid they were going to be a little worried, but hiked about 10 miles to the Chico Basin Ranch. This is a ranch that is really practices regenerative agriculture. They've got Beefmaster cattle, beautiful place. It's actually state land and they have a long-term lease. I saw so much wildlife on Chico Basin Ranch. It was amazing. Pronghorn. Well, I was hiding behind a water tank. Porcupine right next to my tent. Jackrabbit. Then we walked on, a friend was with me, we went to the Frost Ranch, and this is the old main house from the 50s. And they also practice sustainable agriculture. I actually saw a burrowing owl on the Frost Ranch. Boy, look at that weird glitter on the horizon. That is renewable energy. It's a whole bunch of solar panels, several square miles of them. I think those of us here in the Front Range cities, we don't think very much about the impact of renewable energy facilities on the Colorado prairie, and there's a lot of it, particularly, of course, windmills and increasingly solar panels. Prairie dogs, saw very few on the plains. They're usually shot, but here between I-25 and Fountain Creek, they were doing all right. Fountain Creek coming into Colorado Springs, and Fountain Creek. My parents were both photographers. My mom was a writer. My dad photographed Colorado Springs extensively. And when he photographed Fountain Creek 50 years ago, it was a seasonal creek and a lot of wild vegetation along it. Now it's a lot of non-native vegetation and a creek that runs all the time with Colorado Springs water treatment outflow and storm runoff. Colorado Springs is trying to fix this, but the flooding has been just really destructive coming down this creek south of Colorado Springs. You can see here, Fountain Creek, downtown Colorado Springs. These are where homeless people are living, and the creek is cutting away that land as well. Really unfortunate situation. Colorado Springs, and made it to Manitou. And that was the 300 miles of my prairie journey. The next segment was from Manitou to the little town of Minturn. And this is high peaks country. You can see from Colorado Springs, Manitou, up here to Minturn over the high mountains. Didn't see any more farming, of course. Some amount of cattle ranching in South Park. Saw a fair number of animals, but not as many as I would have expected. This segment that I happened to hike, is pretty impacted by development along I-70. But there was good water that I could filter out of the creeks. That was nice. Hey, the North Pole in Cascade. This is a trail crew that wished me well, coming out of Green Mountain Falls. I hiked north around Pikes Peak. I originally thought I was going to summit Pikes Peak, but then I got there and looked up at that 8,000-foot rise and felt my 30-pound pack and went around it. But it was gorgeous. This is Catamount Reservoir. I don't know if most people realize this, but Colorado has more plumbing than like a Broncos stadium bathroom. There are reservoirs and water diversions all over the place. That's Pikes Peak there in the distance. Then once I got around Pikes Peak, I was headed toward Florissant. And that country back there west of Pikes Peak, there's a lot of old 70s subdivisions with houses scattered among the pines. A friend of mine and I walked through this ponderosa forest that had been thinned for wildfire mitigation. So again, the hand of humans is all over the state. You don't think about it. Beaver dams. I love beavers. They could just totally change things in this state. This was in some private land near Lake George, and the landowners there had encouraged beavers because it helped their water table and their wells. Then north of Lake George, like most boulderites, I thought, oh no, I gotta walk through an OHV area. There's gonna be motorcycles and ATVs. What are they gonna think of a boulderite? Oh no. They were the nicest people. Again, it's just like if you get out there and are nice to people and smile at them, they smile back. And my friend and I had a lot of fun just watching the ATVs go by and waving at everybody. Tarryall, walked on up Tarryall Creek, beautiful rocks. Tarryall Creek is a gorgeous area. There's no development along it as yet. A beautiful riparian corridor. Riparian means along a stream or river, and it's really the habitat for almost all animals. So let's hope this doesn't get developed. Then from Tarryall Creek, I cut over a rise into South Park. Really dry upland, but beautiful. Nobody goes there. I didn't see any hikers, hardly, except for a few around Pikes Peak and once I got to Breckenridge. This is South Park. Beautiful grassland there, big skies. Town of Como. Then up over Boreas Pass.
Wow.
Boy, I was stoked when I got to the Continental Divide. I didn't think I was going to make it this far. I thought I'd even be lucky to get to Colorado Springs, because I'm 54, but I guess all that fitness work for 3 months beforehand paid off because I was fine. So walked down Boreas Pass toward Breckenridge, kind of typical of a ski resort area in Colorado, you know, ski runs, reservoir, a lot of houses in the trees here. And here's where I saw almost all the hikers for my entire trip. This was in the 10-mile range, going up over Wheeler Pass. Beautiful wildflowers. Oh, it was mid-July. That's from the top of Wheeler Pass, looking north over the Gore Range. And a not so pretty view. You know, Colorado's mining legacy is visible in a lot of places. This is probably the biggest one. The Climax molybdenum mine, which is off over here, has dumped their tailings and filled this valley for decades. And this is a water tributary for Denver Water, and there's a treatment plant there. Copper Mountain, stayed with a friend here. Then went on up Vail Pass to the back bowls behind Vail. Gorgeous, gorgeous views. Oh, and yeah, again, between Vail Pass and like 30 miles, I saw 2 other hikers. So Colorado's not being loved to death. Everybody just goes to the same 10 places, and it's not here. Back bowls of Vail. Sometime I'll tell you a story about meeting a bear in the back bowls of Vail when I tried to camp, but that's another time. So I got to Minturn, which is here just off of I-70 southwest of Vail. And from there, hiked along the Eagle River and I-70 for a ways, and then cut north and northwest again. You can see the towns here. This was 2 very different geographies. One was the Eagle River Valley for several days, and then over the flat tops, which are stunning 12,000-foot peaks. But they're flat on top with basalt. Saw a fair amount of cattle and sheep up in the mountains on BLM land. BLM stands for the Bureau of Land Management, biggest federal landholder in the country. Saw a fair number of animals, but boy, the human population impact in the Eagle River Valley really shocked me. As a kid, I remember driving I-70 with my mom. In the Eagle River Valley, you know, Avon, Edwards, there was nobody there. And now there's like 50,000 people. So big impact. The number of elk has plummeted in that region as a result. Had some water access, but due to the drought, I actually had to cache water in some places. The ugly underbelly of I-70, crossing the Eagle River. But again, this Avon Edwards area, I mean, they leave no room for animals in the development. I mean, why couldn't they have left a riparian corridor along that river? But instead they put the condos, you know, right up to the edge, no room for the elk. You know, a lot of housing for staff and resort folks. This was a golf course. I was amused. There was a sign on the fence that said they'd gotten a Sustainable Development Award. That seemed a little odd next to a golf course. But this is the Eagle River toward Wolcott, where the development kind of tails off. Beautiful area. Then I headed into the wilds, up over Castle Peak, BLM land. This was my first experience with BLM land. And, you know, the Forest Service and the BLM are 2 very different land management agencies. Forest Service generally maintains trails. They have funding for it. The BLM does not. And I didn't know this. So I headed over and around Castle Peak. The trail ended not where I expected it to. My map said it kept going, but it hadn't been maintained. So I had to turn around and go around the east side instead of the west side. It was rough going, but beautiful. Hugh Carey of the Colorado Sun took these photos for a newspaper article. Just gorgeous, wild country. Didn't see another hiker for 3 days. Met some cattle along the way. I spent part of my childhood on a cattle ranch with my stepfather. These cattle were wild, and most public land that I went through was in good shape. The riparian areas like this valley were being looked after and monitored, but through here, this was just trampled. It was just reeked of cow manure. There was little vegetation left. And this is a problem, but I could see on ranches and a lot of other public land that ranching can coexist quite well with sustainable land practices. But when you slip up, it's not pretty. Here's a spring that was overgrazed and trampled. This is a trail, and man, it's a challenge with a 30-pound pack. Again, the BLM, we need to give them more money to fund trail maintenance, and more people would get out here. The red line is my trail. Since the official trail hadn't been maintained, it was quite the bushwhack. I was terrified of rattlesnakes, but never saw one. Turkey vulture friends. Colorado River, like so many Colorado rivers, also a transportation corridor with the road and railway. Not a lot of room for wildlife. Beautiful Derby Mesa, headed up into the flat tops. Again, all the water's accounted for and plumbed. This was gorgeous. The Island Lakes area up in the flat tops. Most beautiful place I've ever been. Wildflowers. Then came into the White River and up on a place called Sleepy Cat Peak. Gorgeous area. Didn't see much wildlife. That puzzled me. Saw a lot of sheep. And again, there were places where the sheep were doing just fine, and sheep herders were escorting them through the area so they would graze it and move on. But some areas were badly overgrazed. Speaking of human impact, do you log a forest or do you burn it or let it burn? This was a fire 20 years ago. This was logging 15 or 20 years ago. And in talking to people out there, maybe there is a role for logging to help mitigate our fire risk. We need to think about it. I can't imagine many animals survive a fire like this, but maybe they survive logging a little better. All right, the fifth and final segment of my route was up in Northwest Colorado in Moffat County. Really wild part of the state, very few people. Pretty much all cattle and sheep ranching, some coal mining. One town and 140 miles. But beautiful country and a lot of animals. Even saw river otters. I saw 3 river otters in a pond actually near the Colowile coal mine. Mine has taken over most of the ranches in this coal basin. So it was kind of a lonely place. This was the fire near Grand Junction, smoke wall pursuing me up toward the Yampa River. Boy, the roads. I hiked a lot of roads because there really aren't many trails in Colorado. And boy, was there a lot of roadkill.
Oh, wow.
We have got to do something about enabling animals to cross roads safely. This is heading toward the Yampa River. near Maybell Ranch here, and a lot of farmland down along the river. Town of Maybell, great little place. They were very helpful. And then I continued for the final segment of my hike, absolutely no town, nothing, and did a lot of water caching and staged food. A fair number of people helped me. Beautiful land. This is Little Snake River. Water is pretty low from the drought, and also irrigation onto the fields. This is Irish Canyon and Cold Spring Mountain, beautiful remote area. Camp at Irish Canyon. This is a little place called Talamonte Creek, which was gorgeous. Almost all ranch land, a lot of wildlife, a lot of springs along here. Met a badger. She was amazing. I think she was so shocked to see somebody not in a pickup truck. She was like, "What the heck are you doing?" A lot of sagebrush. This is the final day. My husband and one of my daughters and a friend of mine joined me. We got up to the northwest corner with Wyoming, Utah, Colorado. 3 flagpoles. I was so stoked because I had carried this flag across the entire state. And so to celebrate the completion, I raised my flag there at the northwest corner. So public policy thoughts based on everything I saw and people I talked to who actually live there. We need a lot more regenerative agriculture, focused on healthy soil, water, and biodiversity. We really need to help ranchers conserve their land and support that. The good land where the animals live is not the public land, because the homesteaders, they got the good land where the animals live and where you can raise cattle and sheep and grow things. Don't build in riparian areas if you can help it. Humans are fine on hilltops. Look at helping nature from animals' perspective. We need to mitigate the thousands of fences and roads and water diversions in this state. And we need to help out the BLM, provide funding for them to manage these areas in a more sustainable way. And finally, as I did, listen to the people who live on the land. They know best. They really do. So contact me anytime, and I'm happy to answer questions right now.
Well, thank you very much, India. We're going to go to a very serious question from Chad that he's got some concerns. So go ahead, Chad.
Did you see any jackalope?
I ate them for dinner most nights. They're delicious.
That's funny. No, in reality, though, that's a mythical thing, and I'm sure there's all these anecdotal stories that we have across the state. Were there any particular stories that made up your story?
Oh, I got so many good stories about the time I met a bear. I do not ever have food in your tent. I had known this for years, and the mosquitoes were bad, and I was sitting in my tent sorting my food, and I heard, I'm like, oh, that can't have been a bear. And I kept stuffing food in my ursack, and then he sniffed again. It was something else. But anyway, I was fine. Bears generally don't attack humans. Had some bad storms. Met some interesting people, but a lot of great people.
Great, thank you. And India, I just want to let you know, we have many questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to many of them. So I've only got time for probably a couple more, but you're okay still, right, with time? If we have to take a couple more questions, India?
Sure. And
Okay.
look in your Rotary Club's newsletter. There's some links to a couple other presentations I've given about, like, you're wondering how I did my hike. There's a presentation of the Colorado Mountain Club.
Oh, thank you. We'll make sure. Well, yeah, we'll make sure we have good links in the newsletter. So we're going to go to. We do have time for 2 more questions. So one is the Kotkeys. Go ahead, John and Lana.
Yes, I was really curious about how you made contact with people and whether you did this ahead of time to find places to camp, or whether you just showed up at somebody's front door and said, "Can I camp on your land?"
No, I did not just show up at their doors. I spent 3 months before I started walking, both getting fit and researching my route. I knew some ranchers from growing up and camping, and I just networked with people. And then I would like hike 6 days and take a day off and scout the next segment. And that's when I would show up in my vehicle and knock on a door or connect with somebody. People were so helpful.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, the very last question is going to go to Meryl. Meryl Blestrom, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. I can't see. Is Meryl ready? Are you good, Meryl? Okay, I think it's walked away. So why don't we go to Richard Mercer?
I'm here. Do you hear me?
Oh, we hear you now. Go ahead, Meryl.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Thanks for speaking to us, India. It's kind of a coincidence, but my wife, Leslie, is interested in a cross-country hike. And it's amazing to find out she's not alone. Her interest, however, is walking directly from east to west, starting at the border near Ray. And our plan is for me to drive a support vehicle for her. And also I get to be with her every night. So Leslie would be here, but she's doing her usual all-day cross-country ski adventure in the mountains. So I'm asking, what advice would you have for her?
I would say watch my presentation to the Colorado Mountain Club. That'll give you lots of good advice. I intentionally picked a diagonal. I didn't go east, west, or north, south because I thought that might not be as much fun. Because when you head northwest, you constantly have to pick your route because the roads don't go that way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And John Lehman, you have something you'd like to say?
India, I've done a lot of hiking in Colorado, almost exclusively. I've climbed a lot of peaks, but they were all either day trips or maybe 2-day trips. And so I didn't do anything close to as difficult as you have accomplished. So it's really quite remarkable. Thank you for sharing all those beautiful photographs. It makes me kind of inspired to get back out there. I know that you've been a member of Rotary before, and in your honor, the Boulder Rotary Club is pleased to contribute 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund. You know that Rotary has been working to eradicate polio for 26 years, and we are very close. Thank you for your presentation today.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, India. We really appreciate you being here with us today. And your talk was wonderful. It does inspire to get out and see more for sure. So thank you again.